back inside. I had the chemical hopper, the fiberglass hopper, prepped for the new aluminum flange. Ran into a few issues. This new flange is slightly smaller in diameter than the old one. Not a big deal, but it took more fitting, more grinding, and more leveling than what I had originally anticipated. And you can see, now let me show you inside here. This will bring, you can see where it got so thin fitting it that it actually just came through the fiberglass in a couple spots. This is no problem at all. We're going to put new layup in here anyhow, so that's not a concern of mine. What I was mainly after is I needed to maintain this edge of the old fiberglass so I can line this new flange up with this old edge. As long as I maintained the relative dimensions of this old flange, this saves me a lot of elaborate jigging in the fuselage. Simply make this new flange and match the old, and we're right back where we started. Pretty easy, pretty simple. Another thing that's going to make the layup a little bit different is I have a little bit of a gap here where a little bit of a spring to the fiberglass. Okay, that's not going to be a problem, but what we had to decide was thinking ahead the sequence of how we're going to do the layup. Sure, I could put a clamp device in here like that and simply clamp it in place and squeeze down that gap. But if I do, that means that the clamps will have to sit here until the micro slurry, which is the epoxy and the milled fibers that I'm going to bond this flange to the tank with, I'll have to let that set up first, then come out here on the outside. Once the micro slurry or the epoxy with milled fibers sets up, it'll be pretty much flush with these holes, and it will have a little bit of a fillet right here smoothing out this transition. Then we'll bring a woven fiberglass tape to bond the rest of this aluminum to the old fiberglass. Now I want to be cautious in this area right in here. I want my milled fibers and epoxy just to put a tape or a fillet in here, if you will, to smooth out this transition from the old fiberglass to the new flange. I don't want to get any up in here on the fiberglass. On the fiberglass, I want a fiberglass to fiberglass transition. I want the new fiberglass tapes to be bonded right to the old fiberglass. I don't want this milled fiber slurry mixture in between the two layers. I only want the milled fiber slurry mixture surrounding the aluminum. Everywhere the aluminum touches fiberglass, I want it to be encapsulated in this milled fiber solution slurry that I'm going to use. So in the effort of wanting to slurry this flange onto the tank and do my layup at the same time, I need to jig this up inside here that'll allow this flange to hold tight while I work on the outside. As you can see here, I have a simple fixture made up in place to hold the shape of the fiberglass where I want it during glassing. One thing, word of advice, that something I learned years ago going through a EAA workshop, Experimental Aircraft Association workshop. One of the guest speakers said, spend your time building the airplane, not building the workshop. And that had a lot of meaning. In the past, I would spend a lot of time making these fixtures. Shoot, I'd have even up to 3 days in some fixtures making elaborate fixtures. Thinking that you might do the job again down the road, so spend the time now to do the fixture. Well, it ends up being 10 or 15 years later, you've moved that fixture around so much, you end up throwing it in the trash or cutting it up and using it for something else. Spend your time doing the repair. heater's running, so it's pretty loud in here, but I want to bring you up here, show you what I've done. I just knocked the high spots off of this layup from yesterday, have the tank flipped upside down, and in these lightning holes, I mixed up a runny batch of milled fibers and epoxy, microglass. And I packed it down into these holes very tightly until it's all squishing out of the edges. Get you an angle on this side. So next I'm going to mix up another batch of microglass, but this time it's going to be much drier. And I'm going to put a fillet, I'm going to butter up a fillet right along here. Okay, this is real noisy, but I want to set the camera up here so you can see how dry I'm mixing this microglass. Almost to the point to where it doesn't look like it wants to mix. I'm going to go stand in front of the heater for a second with this. Put a little bit of heat on this resin, makes it flow into the fibers, the microfibers a little bit better. I'll be right back and show you what I've come up with. Okay, I went over and stood in front of my halogen light and stirred this. You can see it really made the resins very mobile throughout the mixture. It's challenging doing fiberglass repair work this kind of weather. I mean, it's still only 27 degrees outside, so I have to do what I can. But this is what I'm after. I'm after a very stiff batch so that I can do that fillet really nice. Again, working in cold weather, got my challenges. You can see I have a halogen light set up right there, right on the epoxy. The resin's in the hardener. If I keep the resin in the hardener, I don't know, somewhere around 90, 95 degrees, it flows much better. Now this will relax and flow out some, but I'm going to let this set up a little bit, get almost to a hard taffy consistency. Probably going to take about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and I'm going to do a layup on top of this. But I don't want to introduce a layer of epoxy over top of this and make this runny, so I'm going to let this set up a little bit. Okay, I have this milled fiber and epoxy solution in place like I want it. And you can see the color change right here, a couple low spots I also filled with the milled fiber solution. Across the top here, it's setting up pretty good. This is where I wanted the milled fibers to flow a little bit more, so I mixed it a little bit of a wetter solution. Probably another hour. Yep, probably about another hour, and I'll go ahead and lay up a fiberglass cloth on top of this. Okay, it's been about an hour and a half. This is set up really good. It's still a little tacky. I can push on it and mash it down. This is a little bit harder than taffy, I guess. So it's ready to lay up another layer on top of it. What I've done is I mixed up a slurry of microglass. The reason I call it, this is milled fiber, so it's structural. But the reason I call it a slurry is because it's the consistency. It's much thinner than like a microglass fill that I use for a filleting compound. But being this is still bare aluminum, I'm going to brush this thinner solution of microfibers on top of this aluminum. So give you a nice bed to come back with a fiberglass cloth and lay that up on. What I'm doing, I'm butting this fiberglass weave right up against this flange. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to leave this salvaged edge on this tape. Most situations, I trim that salvaged edge off so I'd have a better transition into my surface. But what I'm doing here, I'm just going to leave it. And turn the camera this way. save on resin, I'm going to pre-wet this out on plastic. Okay, as you see there, I got the weave with the fabric thoroughly wetted out. I had to use more resin than what I like to, so I had to scrape it off and return it back to my bin. Now we're ready to do a layup. That's pretty much it. I'll continue around the edges, stamp this down, make sure it's good and adhered, and I'll do a few more layups, and I'll turn the camera back on and show you the end result. Okay, for the most part, this repair is done. Last night before I left, I put peel ply on top of the final layup, just to smooth out this transition to the old fiberglass. Fabric job I did recently, this is just the scraps of the tapes left over. It's a little bit thicker than regular peel ply that you would buy for fiberglass work, but it's still a dicron material. It's still peel ply, still does the same thing. I'll show you a little bit closer of a picture of this. This layup is done. The peel ply really makes this transition go nice. I could leave this just like it is, or I could gently sand this little bit of a seam to make it easier to wash down and stuff inside the fuselage, which I'll probably sand this just gently. Not enough to shape it or anything, just enough to this hard transition between where the peel ply was, just to smooth that out just a little bit more. This is to the point to where we could install it back in the airplane. No more technically needs to be done, but I am going to take this one step further. I'm actually going to encase this aluminum flange in fiberglass. So I'm going to prepare a layup to a bond to the inside of the tank and come around and encase this flange, and I'll do the same thing on the back side here. We'll encase this aluminum flange in fiberglass. Once I encase this flange in fiberglass, it will be completely impervious to chemical.